But to me, choice is a really important lever because it allows us to build different schools and different systems faster, see what's working, and then try to replicate that.
Thanks for joining me on another episode here of Hall Pass to Nowhere. Our guest today believes that where a child lives should never determine what they are capable of becoming. Shaka Mitchell is a senior fellow at the American Federation of Children and one of the nation's most compelling voices for educational freedom. A former charter school leader and an adjunct professor of constitutional law, Shaka has spent his career at the intersection of policy and the classroom. Today, we're diving into why educational freedom is one of the civil rights issues of our time and how we can rebuild the American dream through a menu of options for every student. Welcome to the show, Shaka Mitchell.
Timothy, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Man, I have been waiting to talk with you and I'm excited to talk with you just because I think right now educational freedom is so polarizing. You have so many different words out there: school choice or school voucher or educational freedom and education choice. And we assume they mean the same thing, but I don't think everyone that uses those terms necessarily means the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let me jump in with the question. We'll go from there. You often say that school choice has always existed for those with money. But AFC wants to make it a reality for everyone. So how do you define educational freedom for the family who feels stuck in a zip code that isn't serving their child?
Yeah. Yeah. Great place to start. So when I talk about the fact that educational freedom or school choice, whatever you call it, has always existed for people with means, what I mean is that for the vast majority of certainly our country's history, we're the United States, so that we're going to talk about primarily in an American context. But this would be true in other countries as well. You could get a top-notch education. You've always been able to get a top-notch education in the United States and even the colonies before that if you were from a family that had the means to pay for it. Right? Come out of pocket and pay for private tutoring, private schools. I mean, the Ivy League schools are the schools that existed when we were still colonies, right? So those schools have been around longer than the country. And if you could afford that, then you had almost a surefire way to achieve kind of whatever your dreams were. There is a second way that I think that choice has existed for certainly the majority of the 20th century and even part of the 19th century, and now we're in the 21st century. And that is if you have the means, if your family has the means to move to a different and quote better location, right? So if you have the ability to move from one neighborhood where there are low performing schools to another one, well, then great for you. And that's primarily how real estate, frankly, gets priced, right? That is a big market signal. In both those cases, though, who is left out of that? People who don't have the means to either come out of pocket for private school or tutors, or who lack the ability to move from one area to another area. And unfortunately, that's a lot of students. Now, to be clear, there are students who are struggling academically, even in wealthy neighborhoods, even in wealthy schools, right? So we know that there's always cases in every school where somebody's needs aren't being 100% met. But one of the things we care a lot about at the American Federation for Children is what about students whose families lack the means? Don't they deserve the right to a choice that works for them? And so when I talk about choice, we're really talking about having a range of options so that a parent can select what works best, because we know that no two children are created exactly alike, right? It doesn't mean that their rights aren't the same. It just means that they have different talents, different traits, different needs. And so we have to have a range of options to meet those needs and serve them well.
When you mention those range of options, can you kind of give us an idea? I guess give us some choices, if you will. Take my audience through it like you're presenting them their options.
Yeah. So again, and the way that we work it in the U.S. is that this is largely a function of state-based policy, right? So as you know, the federal U.S. Department of Education gets all the attention, but really most of the action is at the state level. State and then even local level, right? So most of this is a function of state policy. So if you go to certain states, so I'm going to pick Florida. Florida's got what I would say is a whole range of options. So what does that mean? When you think about school, most people in the United States still are educated most kids are educated in conventional public schools, meaning that the dollar is paid by the government. It's taxpayer dollars, but the government pays. And who operates the schools? The government operates the schools. So that's one option. And that's about 80% typically in a state. Now in Florida, it happens to be a lot less than that. Why? Because there's a whole range of options. So you've got the side of who pays for the school, and then you've got the side of who operates the school. And every time you tinker with one of those, it's a different option. So a private school is when a private family pays and a private organization, a nonprofit usually, operates the school, right? That's a private school. A charter school might be where the government pays public dollars, but who operates it? An independent nonprofit, right? So that's a little bit of a mix. Now there are hybrid schools, hybrid meaning you might go in person 3 days a week and you're remote 2 days a week. There's schools that are totally remote. I think the biggest movement happening right now is the micro school movement. So these schools that are less than, usually less than about 30 kids in a school. So it almost feels like a kind of a throwback to a one room schoolhouse. Those are blowing up, and those are all over Florida. You've got homeschooling, which used to be something that was maybe a little bit reserved for families who maybe had a professional teacher in the family. Often, mom was a teacher, and then you have kids, and then mom decides, okay, well, we're going to stay home, and I'm going to educate kids. Well, that's not the case anymore, and we saw that during COVID. So Florida has all these options, and it's really injected a lot of dynamism into the system.
Absolutely. So when it comes to educational freedom and in this menu of options, wouldn't that negatively impact public schools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's something that we should be concerned with, right? Because if the answer is that, if that answer was yes, then we should absolutely be concerned. Because as I mentioned, 80% of our kids still, attend some form of public school, including public charter schools. I would say no. And Florida, again, is a really great case study for this. So in Florida, where there's about 3 million students, K-12 students, there are 500,000 students who participate in a private choice program, meaning they're getting public dollars to attend some kind of private option. 500,000. That's a lot of kids. There's another 400,000 plus in the state who attend charter schools, right? Then you add homeschool on top of that. So you're talking about already, you're up over, 35%, maybe 40% of kids who are going to a school that's not their zoned school. So if the public schools were going to be harmed, Florida is where it would be happening, right? Because there's such a high percentage. But in fact, what we've seen, there's some research that has recently come out, and it has come from researchers at places like the Urban Institute, which is not like a conservative public policy think tank or something, showing that for the students who remained in public schools in Florida, there's actually a correlation between how they perform academically and when there's more choice available around them. So even for the ones who stay in their schools, they do better when there are more options, when there's more competition, right? And so I think about it a little bit, if I can throw a sports analogy out there. Why do so many schools also? So I live in the South. I live in Tennessee.
Okay.
We have all of a sudden seen schools like Oklahoma and Texas have joined the SEC, right, to play football. We're kind of like the SEC. How can Oklahoma be in the SEC? All right. Well, now it turns out they are. Why does Oklahoma want to be in the SEC? There's TV rights and there's all that. But part of it is because the competition, they believe the competition is so much stronger, right, that all of a sudden it's going to lift them up too. They're going to have access to, a talent pool that's better. The coaches want to coach there, et cetera. And turns out the same thing fundamentally happens with schools is that, when you're at a public school, a private school, a charter school, whatever, if a school down the street is doing well, don't you want to know what they're doing well? And let's see if we can replicate that. And let's see if we can, grow that. And in my experience, great educators are happy to share what they're doing with somebody else. So I actually don't think that there's again, in my experience, there's not a whole lot of hostility between educators from one sector to another. They're kind of like, yeah, let's do the best for kids. Right.
So I know colloquially, I've kind of heard that it's public school versus charter school. And so with that last part of your little comment there, you're saying at the end of the day, in your experience, great educators just want to share and offer their experience to help better whoever they can to give kids a better education, no matter where they're being serviced.
I think so. I mean, as you mentioned in your generous introduction, I spent time working with a number of charter schools, helped start some new schools here in Nashville where I live, the schools serving kids from kindergarten all the way up through grade 12. And I will tell you, where did most of our teachers learn their craft? Alongside teachers who are in conventional public schools, right? You don't go to through a college of education. That's a college of education for charter schools or a college of education for private schools or whatever. Right. Hopefully, if you learn how to teach kids the fundamentals of reading and the fundamentals of math, it doesn't matter, what kid comes in front of you, right? So I think it doesn't matter. I have seen faculty move across the systems, right? And so I don't think it's as hostile. Now, I do think that there's a narrative where people unfortunately, they view education as zero sum. And so they view the resources as for every child who goes to a charter school, that means it's less money for the public school, conventional public school. I think that's a narrative. And in a sense, that's accurate, right? Because resources ought to follow, I believe resources ought to follow the student. But isn't that exactly what we want? And by the way, this happens all the time when people move. And we don't limit parents. We don't say, hey, as soon as you have a school-age child, you're not allowed to move for the next, 13 years. This happens again in my city all the time. I see in my neighborhood where the schools for a long time have been struggling. People have children and they're happy to be in this neighborhood because we have great restaurants and great access and whatever. As soon as their child is 3 or 4, they start looking for the exits and they move to another part of the city or another county if they can.
Right. And
what happens when they do that? Well, those resources travel with them, but we don't fault the families for trying to find a place that works better for them. And so what I'm saying with school choice is just like we wouldn't fault a family for moving, we ought not fault a family for looking to a different model or a different mode if it works best for their child.
Right. Now, some states, I'm trying to think of a specific example. I know I spent some time in Omaha. And if I remember correctly, the school district that I specifically worked with, they kind of had an open enrollment.
Okay.
policy. So no matter where your zip code was, you could go to any school, wherever. Is that very similar to the school choice and educational freedom, or is it getting close, but it's still not quite to that menu of options that you've kind of referenced?
No, it's a good question, and I would say it's an item on the menu.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And so it's an item on the menu, and in some states it works really well. I believe in Arizona, actually it is open enrollment like that is the largest form of school choice in Arizona.
Okay.
I believe that's right. And Arizona has a lot of other types of school choice. I mean, something like 85,000 students participate in the education savings account program, where families can get funds. They can spend it on a range of different things. They can spend it on tuition. They can spend it on homeschooling, all sorts of stuff. But open enrollment is actually the biggest form there. What I would say is, again, it's a great option on the menu, but there's some cases in which open enrollment might not suit you well. So I'll just give a couple examples if I might.
Yeah.
So open enrollment might not suit you well if you're in, say, a rural county and you've got schools on opposite ends of the county. You may have to go very far, very, very far, to take advantage of the open enrollment, say for a high school. Right.
Yeah.
So that might be an example. Whereas if you had another form of choice, there might be a little private, Catholic school right next to you. But if you don't have the means to do it, now your only option is to drive, 40 minutes across the county to, one way, or have your child on a bus. And so that's one possibility with open enrollment. The other, in my opinion, problem with open enrollment is that in an open enrollment system, the operator of whether it's school A on the east side of the county or school B on the west side of the county, the operator fundamentally is still the same. It's the school district.
Yes.
Now there's going to be different teachers.
Yes.
There's going to be, maybe there's a magnet school. Maybe, so again, there can be different ways that it absolutely works, but fundamentally the provider is still the same, and families just may be looking for something different, right? And so you may just, as a matter of conscience, not want to send your child to that school, to a public school, right? I mean, as a matter of, when I say conscience, I mean like religious liberty. You may say, I really want my child, I think it's very important for them to receive a faith-based education.
Right.
Well, you can't do that at public school A or B. So what's your option? And if you don't have the means to do it, then you're sort of stuck.
Right. Right.
So it's a great option. So I don't mean to I don't want to throw shade at open enrollment.
Right.
But I would sort of say, if you ask me how many choices is enough, I would say, how many do you have? And add one, right?
Oh, okay.
I think I would say sort of N plus one, always.
Got you.
Let's not try to limit ourselves.
You mentioned briefly about education savings accounts, right? Do you think that trying to figure out how to phrase this appropriately? I'm just going to say it, and you may have to correct me. But do you think parents have a firm understanding of education savings accounts and the benefits of them and how they can really put them to use?
I don't think that's an inappropriate question at all. I think it's a great question. And I think mostly the answer is we still have a lot of education that needs to happen towards parents, right? Because if you're my age, I'm a parent. Well, there are options that exist now that did not exist when I was coming through school.
Right.
So I still meet families that say, that think that you have to pay tuition for a charter school. Well, charter schools are in every state are public schools. No charter school requires tuition, anywhere in the country. And so, but that didn't exist when we were kids and when we were growing up. So we just don't know necessarily a whole lot about it. Same thing if you have never had exposure to how the process works, the admissions process works for a private school, that's totally new to you. And it's not necessarily intuitive. So with every choice program, I think it's really, really important that there are organizations that come alongside and are committed to educating parents about it. Absolutely. I think it's super important.
Got you. We're going to take just a quick step back. Everyone has their why about what is passionate to them and what really drives them and fuels them. And so your personal educational journey and personal upbringing and the sacrifices that I read about your mother making for your education, how much of an impact did that have, or does it currently still have, towards your voice and your stance on educational freedom and you committed to doing this work?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I think you're absolutely right that we all have an education story. We all have a story, but when it comes to education, we all have an education story, which is one of the reasons that I think education policy and politics can sometimes get so heated. It's because we've all had an experience with it, right? Whether or not you were in homeschool or whether or not you had a great experience, a bad experience, public, private, whatever, you had some kind of formative education experience. And so it necessarily colors how we approach things and who we advocate for. In my case, part of my journey really started when my mom was dissatisfied, then a single mother, but like dissatisfied with our low performing academically and unsafe public schools where I lived. I grew up on Long Island in New York, and she was going to do what she could to find a better option. And I ended up going to eventually attending Catholic school for elementary and middle school. And then I went to a big public high school. And I like to remind people of that, by the way, because I really enjoyed my large public high school and I enjoyed my Catholic middle school. So I'm not like locked into being a private school guy or just one set way. The question is, does this work for this child? And I think my mom was really committed to that. Education was of really paramount importance for me and for my siblings. That we really stressed that, and really proud to say that I and all my siblings were basically first generation college graduates, and all of them have graduated and gotten higher degrees, post-secondary degrees, and are doing well. And I think that's such a testament to our parents. And it's also a reminder that at the beginning of a child's story, you don't know how it's going to end.
Right.
We don't know how it's going to finish. So just because that child's parents didn't, graduate from college, or maybe even attend, or maybe even didn't even finish high school, so what? We don't know how it's going to end. So we've got to treat every child as if they've got the potential to do something really, really special. And so can we get them in an environment where they can thrive? And I was really, I'll say blessed to be in some of those environments where I think that the education really did make the difference. And so I really credit my mom, credit my grandmothers for their sacrifices to make that happen, because it was not easy.
Right. No, man, wow. During your time, serving as the chair of the Tennessee State Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
Yeah.
I believe that at some point there, it came out that your stance was that you view educational freedom as a modern civil rights issue. Why is there so much pushback on an issue that seems that it shouldn't be so, I guess?
Yeah. Doesn't it seem like this should be a no-brainer? I don't mean necessarily education freedom, though I would say that I think that should be a no-brainer, but it's not intuitive that people would get so fired up about education policy.
Right.
But people get fired up. I mean, we all remember the videos of school board meetings over the past few years where, it was like there were practically riots breaking out and by the way, that's on the left, that's on the right. It was just, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anybody. It was just people were out of pocket. Okay. I think that part of this is, if it's justified because we are talking about our most precious commodity, and that's our children. So I do think that we have a moral imperative to get this right, or at least do the best we can, And so I think whether it's keeping our children safe, whether it's making sure that all children have access to high quality schools, regardless of race, regardless of income, regardless of geography, right? So when I talk about it being a civil rights issue, that's what I mean, that those characteristics, whether or not they are mutable or immutable, that those should not be determinative of the outcome of an education for a child. So if your parents are low income, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have access to and receive a great education. If your family is high income, let's not assume that everything's fine and we don't have to put any resources there, right? So when I talk about it being a civil rights issue, that's what I mean, is that all children need access to it. I do think that there are too many adults who have made a living off of an education system that is low performing. And what I mean by that, so that might be a little, there's a hot take, but I think that many districts spend an inordinate amount of money on administrators who work in the central office, who are never in a classroom with kids, who add very little value to the student's outcome, whether it's academically or, social well-being, whatever. I mean, when you look at where the dollars have gone over the past 25 years, it's not teacher salaries, it's administrative, kind of overhead, central office, back office staff. A lot of that money as well goes to consultants and folks who come in and are for $50,000 are happy to do another professional development session that all the faculty forgets about as soon as they get to the parking lot.
Yes, they do.
And that's a lot of money. We spend a lot of resources, and I'm not mad at the consultants necessarily, because a lot of them have great ideas, whatever. But I know of an organization that does really, really good work on literacy. But I think we should ask the question, why in the world do we need a third-party organization to do all this great work on literacy so that it can basically come in and do the job of a school district that's already getting over $1 billion in revenue annually? Why do we need a third party to do your job? And so there's a lot of folks who have made a living off of that, and those revenues shrink if more kids exit the system and go to take advantage of school choice programs. And so I think that's a reason it gets so contentious.
Right. And well, with that, like you said, why do you have to bring a third party in for something that the school district is supposed to be able to do or provide? With that, how do we make education more equitable? How do we provide a high quality education system so that no matter where you are, you're receiving quality education?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a place where, where again, it highlights one of the reasons that I believe that choice is such an important lever. Mm-hmm. And I say lever because there's lots of levers. You can pull lots of different levers when you're thinking about how to improve our system, right? You could do high quality teaching. You could do principal and vice principal training and, leadership education, right? I mean, the financial and operational stuff, curriculum, all this. These are all different levers. But to me, choice is a really important lever because it allows us to build different schools and different systems faster, see what's working, and then try to replicate that. So the question comes up often, they say, well, why don't we just take the money from a choice program and improve the whole system? And what I would say is well, let's look at a state without a choice program. It's not like the state of Oregon or the state of California hasn't been trying to improve its education system. And they've been doing it irrespective of having a choice program. It turns out it's really hard work. It's also really hard work when you're trying to do it at a scale that's so big that you say, well, we're going to work on our teacher development. Okay, great. And you say, well, how are we going to know when it works? And then the district or the state says, well, just give us like 10 years and we'll let you know. Well, 10 years is another generation of kids gone.
Yep.
Out the door. So one of the things that's nice about a choice environment is that you let these smaller, often smaller schools start up faster so that we can go, oh my gosh, what is that school down the street doing? I can think of a school. It's in Clarksville, Tennessee. Power and Grace Academy, it's called. Little school started by a former public school educator and teachers union employee, actually, but wanted to start a small faith-based school serving the African-American community, which was really underserved in that particular city, is still. And she said, well, I'm just going to start this little thing and let's see if it works. Turns out it's really working, and parents are showing up and want the school to expand. They just moved into a bigger building. Well, what I would say is that's great. Now let's see if we can replicate that sort of thing. What's working there? And that principal would be happy to tell you, because she's not worried about the competition. She's got a good thing. She's not interested in running a 50,000 student school. She wants to run her school. So if she can help someone else be better, she's happy to do it. And choice allows that to happen. I think our school districts are often, frankly, too big, and they're not nimble enough to adapt quickly. That's why everybody was caught so flat-footed when COVID hit. And so you didn't have districts, by and large, you didn't have districts doing really innovative things. Instead, a district was basically like, well, we're either all open or we're all closed. That's not a great option. I feel like hindsight's 2020, right? So yeah. At the very beginning, it was pure chaos. I get it. It's just triage mode. But that second year, when my kids were home for a whole full year after, we could have done better. Right. And we were just not, I think it was like a lack of creativity and a lack of nimbleness.
No, I understand that for sure. For sure. And so I would imagine that, if we were able to roll something like this, nationwide, with these menu of options, and you basically pick the education that services your child best, right? I would imagine that would create a more highly engaged parent and students across the country, right?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that a researcher out of University of Arkansas, his name is Patrick Wolf, he talks about that. He talks about civic engagement, and civic engagement is actually higher in among parents whose children participate in choice programs. And that's really interesting to me. Civic engagement meaning like, how are they participating in meetings? Are they voting? Things like that. And that's really interesting because, we have to ask, okay, well, why is that? What about your child going to this school or that school would affect that civic engagement? My hypothesis is that there's a few things happening, but among them is that when you really have agency over the decision about where your child goes to school, I think agency begets agency.
Yes.
And we see that, you're an educator. We see that with our students too, right? If a student realizes they can do one thing, well, they don't want to just do one thing. They want to do the next thing. They want to say, well, what else can I do? Sometimes that gets a little bit, they get a little creative with what they want to do.
Right.
Right. But when people realize, this is a human thing, when we realize that we have agency, when we have ability to kind of control our own destiny, turns out we like it.
Yes.
And we want to control our own destiny. And I think that spills over from the school domain into the public life domain. So people say, oh, well, I got to make this choice and it was a good choice and I see positive outcomes. What if I make this other choice? What if I do engage with my city council? What if I do engage with just my neighborhood association or with my neighbor? It doesn't have to be these grand scale things. And so I do think parents are more engaged. I also think the flip side is true. If you are at a school that's let's say it could be a low performing, it could be a high performing school. But if you're at a school where parent input is not welcomed, well, what's going to happen? Parents are going to stop giving input.
Yes.
Because they will know, well, I'm not going to give you my opinion because you don't do anything with it.
Absolutely.
Good or bad. So they stop, and then you get this cycle where the teachers and the administrators say, well, we have low parent engagement. To which I would say, well, of course you have low parent engagement because you didn't take it seriously. So to me, one of the things I love about choice is that you really do get families engaged. And I will say, as a former school administrator, right, that can be a little bit scary. Because you don't know where that's going. Right. And so what I would tell school administrators is, if you're gonna talk the talk about parent engagement, you have to be ready to walk the walk.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to know if you say, hey, Mr. Mitchell's door is always open.
It better be.
Well, cool. Somebody's going to walk through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's in my opinion, it just, my limited scope, it just seems like so much of the friction about choice or freedom or whatever word you want to, put in there is one side scared of the power shift or power balance. And it shouldn't, in my opinion, it shouldn't be about that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of that. The fear of the unknown, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of fear of the unknown. Because, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, this is a different dynamic, a different environment than what it was like. If you went to a school, as I did now, I'll date myself here, but if you went to a school 30 to 40 years ago and the school closest to you was the school that you went to, well, that's the system that you know. And so it can feel really unknown. But interestingly, and a lot of people don't realize this either, the United States is an outlier in this regard.
Right.
Most westernized democracies have more forms of school choice than we do.
Wow.
That's European. That is Central and South American countries. It's Southeast Asian countries. The government funds a range of schools. So if you go, for instance, to the Netherlands, you can attend a Catholic school, a Muslim school. You can attend a Montessori type school, whatever, and the government pays for that. There are certain things that have to be, we want to make sure that the kids can read, right? So there can still be some national benchmarks, but that kind of, some people call that education pluralism. That kind of pluralistic environment actually exists in most places outside the U.S., Canada. So the United States is pretty unique, actually, in the limitations that we put on parent choice. And we don't see those kind of limitations on lots of other things, right? It's much, much easier to, and I know this from experience, it is much easier to start a new bank in the United States than it is to open an accredited charter or private school. Wow. That seems a little bit crazy to me.
Yeah, seems off.
Yeah, it does. It just seems off. It seems like it's misplaced priorities.
Wow. So speaking of innovation and school choice and learning models, and we talked about a little bit of the polarized climate of education debates and education policy, right? Talk to us about the Come Together Music Project.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Well, Come Together Music Project is really just a passion project of mine.
Okay.
But it has recently become an official 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Okay.
And our mission is to use music to deepen existing relationships, create new ones, and build bridges across political, socioeconomic, and generational divides. And it's something that, I live in Nashville. It's Music City. So there's kind of always music in the air. And what we do with Come Together, in fact, we just did a session, excuse me. We just did a session this past week with, in partnership with TEDx Nashville. And our guests were Mayor of Nashville, Mayor Freddie O'Connell, and this Grammy nominated musician, Devin Gilfillian. And what we do in every Come Together session, so these are online, you can find them on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, whatever. But we also have done these in person, is we walk the guests through a series of questions or prompts, and they have to respond with a song. They don't have to sing the song. Let me be clear. They give us a song selection, and then we listen to a little bit of it, and then they explain why. And so, for instance, we recently asked, well, what's a song that takes you back to middle school? And one of our guests said, oh, well, that's easy. It's Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. And we listened to some of it. And then we heard why, and we heard how he learned about that song and the friend and the relationship that was formed around that song. And one of the reasons that I think music is so important is because music helps us recall memory so well, but it's also a way that helps us to humanize one another so that we can have these deeper conversations, right? And I think a lot about the education policy world that we've been talking about and how polarized and politicized that's become. And I think part of it is because we have forgotten how to humanize one another. And so when I talk about education freedom, when I talk about it as a one-on-one, like I really care about your child receiving the education that works for, him or her. I don't meet parents who hate that.
Right.
Ever. When we're talking human to human, person to person, and we say, no, I care about your child. And regardless of what party affiliation you have, regardless of whether or not we, look the same or are from the same part of the country or whatever, when people know that you're willing to listen to them, I think that goes a long way. And we've forgotten how to do that in a lot of political spaces. And so Come Together Music Project really helps us. It forces us to sit down and listen and share stories and humanize and realize. And we joked and we said, hey, you may not agree. In fact, you're almost certainly not going to agree with the mayor on 100% of the things he does. But now the next time you read about a decision he makes, I hope you think about the fact that in the back of his mind, Ice Ice Baby is playing. And maybe that will kind of cut through some of the tension a little bit. You will know that this is a real person. And we talked about other things too. So some of them very serious. We talked about a song that reminds you of someone you lost. Right. And so you see, these are real people, not just a political enemy.
Man, that's amazing. And wow, I almost feel like every PD in school should start with like a mini version of that. I really very much do, because some of these PD sessions and PLC meetings and who's dictating and driving this change can get contentious as well.
100%.
Shaka, it has been an amazing time and session today. I want to give the floor to you for these last couple minutes or however long you need, just to make whatever pitch or whatever you want to just say to whoever may come across this podcast, listening to it or watching it, because we are available video now as well this season. So I want to give you this time just to make whatever pitch or just, reemphasize some points that you may have made earlier. So
great. Well, thank you so much, Timothy, for having me on. And I really appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the work that you do in your real day-to-day career is great work. And so thanks for serving kids. Two things really come to mind. One is that I would encourage anybody listening that when you think about school choice, that you do just what we did, that you leave yourselves open to having the conversation and really open to saying, all right, accepting that our current system is imperfect. how are we going to get it right for this child this year? Right. I think when we do that, it helps us to get out of the place where we're thinking about whether it's Republicans and Democrats or teachers unions or what have you. Let's think about students. Let's stay student centric, and let's also trust parents in that to be part of, I would say, a pivotal part, maybe the most important part of that process of selecting the educational environment for their child. So I would invite your audience to kind of keep an open mind there. The second thing I would say, just to give folks something to check out and keep an eye on, because it's going to be happening this year. But recently, a federal tax credit passed, and this was part of the one big bill last year. And I would be lying if I said that I read all 1,300 pages of it, but I did read 2 pages of it, and 2 pages were about a new federal tax credit. And what that is going to do is it allows taxpayers to get a federal tax credit again on their federal income taxes if they contribute up to $1,700 to a scholarship granting organization in your state. So you can contribute money. I could contribute $1,700 to the Middle Tennessee Scholarship Association, scholarship organization, and that organization might have a mission to give scholarships to students who are pursuing the arts or pursuing, STEM, a STEM focused education, whatever it is. The scholarships are accessible to kids in private, public, charter schools. So a whole range of options. And this program is available in every state. And so I would say keep an eye on it. So you asked, hey, what would happen if this kind of thing rolls out in every state? Well, it could be happening soon. Governors have to opt in. Already, I think close to a dozen governors have said that they are going to opt in. It goes into effect in 2027, but the work kind of behind the scenes is starting this year. And I think that could be something that really has a major impact in the coming years. And listen, to me, this, again, doesn't have to be a partisan thing. If you're a governor and you don't opt into this, what you're effectively doing is you're saying you don't want people to contribute to scholarship organizations for kids in your state in public, charter, and private schools. Those taxpayers can still contribute to scholarship organizations in other states. So for instance, if my governor said that he didn't want to participate, well, I can still get the credit. I'll just send my money to Georgia.
Wow.
Which is like, why would you do that? So keep an eye on that federal tax credit, and it'll be rolling out this year.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Well, Shaka Mitchell, I want to thank you for participating in a conversation that helps redefine education.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.